Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Childcare Bridge podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your childcare center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Childcare Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hey there, and welcome to this week's edition of the Childcare Bridge. Today's topic is a little bit of a deep dive into a few metrics that literally will make or break your entire business. What's interesting about these metrics is that they seem to be interpreted very differently. And the reason that I know this is that I report on these metrics a certain way. We have hundreds of childcare center clients that are then reporting a little bit of a different way or interpreting things a different way. And what I realize is that often it's semantics. So one of your locations might be reporting, for example, your registers differently than another location is reporting your enrollments. Or they might be thinking they're the exact same thing, or they're thinking they're the opposite thing. So I've realized that without a perfect data set of these few metrics, it's next to impossible to build a business that can last without you. Now, to start off our conversation, there are only two ways that your childcare center business is going to grow. There's only two. The first one is through acquisition. So if you have one location, you buy another, inherently, you just grew at least your top line revenue. The second way is by deploying marketing. You might say, well, Michael, what about expanding locations? What if I were to add another? Yes, that's going to help you grow. However, you need the marketing to drive those enrollments. And what I'm finding day after day after day after day is that childcare center owners are so much more concerned about not even just the curriculum is extremely important, but I'm trying to come up with a couple of examples off the top of my head. What color classroom you're going to change the color to? What new toys you're going to buy in the infant room? What additional stuff you're going to add to the playground? What you're going to order for your Friday lunches for your team. Now, again, these are all things that are relevant, but if you know that there's only two ways that your center is going to grow, is marketing and acquisition, and you're spending 98% of your time on everything else that's not related to those two things, you're in for a little bit of a rude awakening. So let's dive into the metrics, and then let's talk through how to track these, how to interpret them, the frequency and all that great stuff. So the first one for me as a marketing first organization is tours. I need to know exactly in real time. That's the other piece. In real time, not a month later, same day. How many tours came into every one of my locations? So let's just use simple math. Let's say on average, you're doing one tour a day. So 5 tours a week, 20 tours a month. So I've got this location that's doing 5. This location, maybe they're doing 7. This location over here is doing 4. So you need to know that same day on a document, a sheet that you can see in real time. That's the other secret sauce here. In real time. It doesn't have to be anything overly complex. I run most of my entities on Excel, literally Excel. The team is updating things in real time to Excel sheets. So how many tours came in? That's the first metric. Now, why do I want to know that? If that goes to 0, my marketing is not working. If that's low, and I'm thinking that I want to grow and add, let's say 100 enrollments. How am I going to add 100 enrollments if I'm currently getting 2 tours a week, for example? That would mean I'd have to convert every single one of those tours, and I'd have to do it every single month. And I believe if I'm doing the math, I would still fall short by a handful. Oh, and by the way, I'd have to lose 0 families. So if you're not tracking your number of tours, it's legit impossible for you to see, is the marketing you're doing working? Now, a much different conversation, and I'm hoping that this isn't your first time listening to an episode, and if it is, welcome. But marketing is the most important function in your childcare business. You need to reflect that by way of the amount of time and money you are investing. Most of you are not even underinvesting, you're just not even taking the marketing of importance. So I know we need a website and to do some social media. Demonstrate, if you want to grow, that that marketing is going to drive everything. Otherwise, you're just kind of spinning your wheels and you're in business and hoping, my least favorite word, one of my least favorite words, another one is someday, but you're hoping that word of mouth and walk-ins and people are just going to find out about your center and everything is going to be perfect. There is far too much money on the line, far too much of your hopes, dream, like your future for most of the people we work with is riding on the success or failure of this business. So if you know that if this entity, this business dies, that you don't even know how you're going to ever be able to retire, provide a lifestyle for your family. Like I have seen every single horror show when it comes to childcare centers that you could ever imagine. I see people losing everything all day. We have phone calls, emails that are coming in every single day. Michael, we're $100,000 a month in debt. We haven't paid our leases in 5 months. We've got everything. We've got a second mortgage on our house. What do we do? Like this stuff is like, I'm giving you real talk. I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm trying to tell you that if you are not taking your marketing seriously, and the fastest way that I can tell you're not taking it seriously is how much money you're willing to put down and how much time you're willing to spend. My patience has run out for the number of center owners that I talk to, that we get on and we start talking numbers and they're doing, let's say $1 million, $2, $3, $4, $5 million in top line, and they won't even invest a few $1,000s a month to grow their business. That rate there shows me they're not serious about seeing this thing grow. They're going to hope that everything works out. That's not how you grow a business. So metric number 1, how many tours are coming in every single day? Roll it up to the week, roll it up to the month by location. That's the first one. That one's very easy to not mess up. The hardest part of messing it up is that often your directors will not update it for a few days or even a week. I need to know in real time. I don't want to wait until the end of the month to say, well, we threw a bunch of money at marketing, but it only drove 1 tour. I need that data in real time. So if I need to pivot on the dime, I can do that. Metric number 2 is registrations. And this is where the semantics start to come in. So a registration is someone that either took a tour or they bypassed the tour, and they have done one of 2 things. The first thing they have to have done is filled out paperwork and given you a start date. That's the non-negotiable. The second one, if you charge a deposit, they also have had to have paid the deposit. At the very least, you have paperwork signed, you have a start date, you know the age. That is now a registration. Now, here's where I start to see things get a little bit squirrely. I go in and then I start looking at your registration report. Now, what I love about being able to see registrations is that this metric should show you how your tours are converting, but also giving you a pulse on what do the next few months look like. So do you have another 10 families starting next month and you've got 30 in the new year and then you've got another 10 here? What do those look like? But I can tell you that when I run registration reports, what I often find are dozens, if not hundreds of families that were supposed to have started weeks ago, months ago, and even in a worst case scenario, I have seen years. So you had a deposit, they signed paperwork, they didn't show up. So these registration numbers, I need to know the start date, and then I want to have a box checked. Have they given a deposit if you charge one? Is the paperwork signed? If one of those isn't set, so if you are charging a deposit, they've given you a deposit, they haven't signed the paperwork, that is not a registration, that is a lead. Until they convert by signing the paperwork, they are not marked as a registration. And this is where centers often will try and manipulate their data. They'll say, well, yeah, these people verbally committed. Okay, great. When are they coming? Well, they verbally committed to start in the new year. That's a lead. They stay as a lead or as a tour. They do not get moved to registration until paperwork is signed. And if you have a deposit, they've given that. So that's your next sheet within your Google Sheets you're going to have. How many registrations do we have? What's the start date? What's the age? The third metric is enrollments. And this is where often people will start to, again, manipulate the data. They might count people that registered as an enrollment. An enrollment has a very simple definition. An enrollment is somebody who has started and paid. Simple. Let's say, well, Michael, if they're supposed to start on the 1st, so I have them as a register. Let's say they're supposed to start on the 1st. Don't I put that in then as an enrollment? That is not in as an enrollment until they have physically walked in the building. Now, why would I do that? Until you can tell me your percentage of families that register and actually show up, I have to budget. I have to plan that a bunch of these families are not going to join. And so why would they give paperwork and give a deposit if they're not going to enroll? I've got centers that we have had signed contracts that never start, never got on the phone with us. I can't count them until they have paid and started. We have centers that even paid and never started. They have to walk in. They have to physically be there. Now, you have to manage this in a pretty significant way. What I don't want you to do is assume that, well, Michael just said no one's going to show up. I need you to look at the metrics. So let's say next month you are telling me that there are 10 families that are in as registered that are going to start in varying days. How many of those families then end up starting? Did you get 10 for 10, 9, 5, like whatever the number is? And I want you to track that for a few months. But let's go off of month number 1 and we're going to leverage that data. So let's say that you get 9 out of 10 of those families that registered that end up showing up and they're now in enrollment. You can know that with a pretty high level of certainty then that hopefully next month the data is similar. Now you're going to track it next month if it's 90 or 100. If it's drastically lower, you're going to have a 90-day average. So you can work off of that percentage. Well, Michael, why would we work off of a 90-day percentage? The reason that we want to work off of a 90-day percentage is that you might have some months that are really, like, there might be some things that happen in certain months. So September, for example, you might think if you're going off of 90%, but in reality, a lot of families make their final decision a few days before and they don't even call the other center or centers. You might have some of those low months, and I don't want you to massively overstate. I need you to know then how many enrollments you have so you're within ratio, but also so you can start to staff up accordingly. So if you're going to be out of ratio by adding these 9 new enrollments next month, then you know that you need to get ahead of staffing or some temp help, or you need to move some things around to be within ratio. But if you were to do that and you're only adding 5 people because half of them just completely no-show, you're going to always be overstaffed. So make sure that when you're looking at those registered, how many then move into an enrollment? Once they're in as an enrollment, they're removed from registered. It goes into the percentage so that I'm tracking it so that I know every single month how many of those families that committed to come and become an enrollment ended up enrolling. And then you work your data off of that. If you're managing your data just off of enrollments, I often have now been seeing that a lot of centers are putting in registers as an enrollments. So you might say, well, Michael, we've got 100, we're at capacity. And then I start running reports and see, well, half of those haven't even paid you. So really you have 50. Now, the other piece to the enrollment equation, and this gets more into the notion of profitable ratios, but I need you to be able to tell me then every location, every day, how many families are supposed to be there. So how many full-time, part-time, what days are families coming? That's another one of the data points that you can skew. You might tell me you have 100 enrollments, but in reality, you have 50 families that are coming 3 days a week and 50 that are coming 2. So you really have 50 full-time equivalent. If your capacity is 150, you might be telling me we've got capacity for 150. However, we already have 100. You actually have 50. You don't have 100. You've got 50 full-time equivalents. So that gets a little bit more into the layers of managing profitable ratios and classroom optimization, and that's a little bit above this particular episode. But if I come back and I come full circle, metric number one, how many tours are you're actively taking every single day? Tours that show up by location, updated every day. Number two, how many of those then are turning into registration? They give you their form signed, and if you have a deposit, they also provide that. If both of those are required, until both those are met, they are still in as a lead. When one or both is met, depending on your center, check the box. That's a registration. What's the date that they're supposed to come in? And then you're going to continue to track that family. When they show up, they get removed from registration, and now they're in as an enrollment. And then you're tracking that percentage. So you're always then maintaining that list of registrants, but you're focusing the list of registrants ahead of the curve. Very few families are going to end up just magically showing up that were supposed to come on the 1st or the 15th that then ghost you. We can reactivate some of them, but the chances are slim. So I don't want you to have this huge list and say, we've got 100 people that are registered. And then when I dig in, yeah, you've got 20 that are registered for the next few months, but 80, they're probably not coming. That gives you the health, because we need a reality check. We need to see how much more money we need to invest to drive the tours, drive the registrations, monitor that conversion percentage so that you can then see how many enrollments you actually have. How many of those then are full-time equivalent enrollments? This allows you to staff up. This allows you to forecast your cash, but also to really reverse engineer everything. So this becomes a marketing math equation. How much money into marketing do we need to drive X amount of tours, X amount of registrations equals X enrollments? Everything is marketing. Get out there, track these numbers, and you'll be able to get yourself from working in the business to working on it. And that is what makes up a no-joke childcare business. Michael Tasner signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'll see you next week.